This is, for those of you I don't know, our monthly Future Proof Masterclass. The Future Proof community is a community of people going from success to significance. It is global, time zones permitting, and every month we have a guest expert to talk to us about something that allows us to future-proof our life and our work. And Marc and I are in another community together, and he was posting about his fantastic book coming out in February. And I just hit him up and said, you have to come and talk about your work to our community of people. So thank you so much, Marc. It's really lovely to have you
such a
here.
pleasure.
So Marc was doing wellness before it was cool. You have spent the last 40 years doing a tremendous amount of human and organizational development. And you, in 1978, pioneered the Total Life Compass Plan to shape global wellness culture. So I hope that you feel like that is bearing fruit now because it's important. And then you launched the Intergenerational Intelligence, IGQ, in 2019, aimed at improving intergenerational communication and a number of different, I would say, experiences around that to bring people together to live their best lives and give them perspective on what a good life can be.
Thank you for that introduction. And I turned 73 not so long ago, and I've been working in this field for a very long time at many, many levels. I started off in the workplace well-being space in 78, as Diana just shared, when there were 5 programs in the country and in the U.S. and in the world. At that time, it was probably maybe 10. And since that time, I've been involved with lots of different iterations of that original program called Total Life Compass. But the biggest transition was moving into the corporate space beyond Total Life Compass as a result of a very important career shaping moment for me, going from success to significance. I want to underline that. We were having a lot of success with our program back then, and I was just reflecting on this in my book. And a VP who was a friend and a running partner with me at the time took me out for lunch and said to me, Marc, your program hasn't even touched anything of significance yet. And I was 20-something at the time, and I felt my ego was hurt by that statement. And I turned inward that evening and thought about what he said. And one of the things he said was, your program is a contemporary infirmary. And I said, what does that mean? And he went on to explain. And he basically said, Marc, the people you're working with come to you for relief from the pain of working in our space. And then you put a Band-Aid on them and send them back to get beat up again. And I said, The first awakening for me about what culture means. Couldn't define it that way then, but what I found out was a change had to happen for me. And I got very inspired by him to ask him if I could move out of my role and move into leadership development and management training to impact the way in which the culture shaped itself, so that we could have people coming to us to enhance their performance and abilities to come back in and plug in. And that was a pivotal moment in my career and my life. And I worked in leadership development, management development for many years after that, as a result. And here I am at 73, talking about that very thing again. How do we go from who we are to something better that shapes the world in a way in which everybody can be able to do their best, because there's the proper soil for that to happen. And that's a lot what I'm writing about. So let's get on with the show. And the first slide here comes from a participant in a dinner series on pivoting to purpose that I've been hosting, where people come and have something to eat and share with each other things that we're going to talk about today. An artist who's also a poet sent me this 2 days ago. I didn't have a plan for this to be part of the presentation to start with, and I was so moved by it. She wrote this and then crafted this image, which I was very happy to see. And I want to read that to kind of set the setting for today, because what I'd like everybody to try to do, if they can, is let go of, if you will, your corporate work or professional title for a moment, for 40 minutes or so that we'll be in this process together, and think about yourself and who you are, what you represent, what you value most, what you care about, what you want more of, what you want less of, who you want to be with, how do you want to be with those people, and what do you want to do? How do you want to impact the people that are close to you, the people that you interact with at work, the people that you interact in your life in general? What kind of impact do you want to have? And what does doing that bring back to you in terms of significance? And how does that translate to success? Who you are, who you spend time with, how you spend time, what your intentions are, those sorts of things. I want to get to that level of feeling today, if possible. And we'll all be able to do that at whatever level we can, but just give it a go. So I want to read this, because it just meant so much to me, and I hope it is a good way for us to start our conversation today. So, pivots on life's canvas. Craft your life with an artist's touch. Pivot with purpose and don't rush. Draft the blueprint from start to end. An architect of time, this message we send. A life well drawn with care and plan. Each pivot a stroke from your hand. From youth's bright dawn to elders' wise span, the art of purpose, life's grand plan. With each twist and turn, a line is drawn, the art of living from dusk to dawn. In perfect purpose's sketch, find your role. Inner mastery's whisper, outer impact's goal. In the gallery of years, let's each hue blend, pivot with grace as curves ascend. Your masterpiece, a life's work true, the canvas breathes, reflecting you. Important message and a reflection that I think is very important for us to be able to take time to do from time to time at any age or stage of life. Very important to do. So a little bit about my background, just from the context of setting the stage for how this book and how this process has emerged. As Diana introduced me, the Total Life Compass program started in 1978 and is still evolving. And mainly because I've been evolving. So as my life experience has shaped me and my thinking and made its impression I've been iterating this for decades. I translated that into another program, which was part of my leadership and management development background, called D3 Leadership Learning. And if you see that clearly at the top there in the middle, D1 is leading self. So I created a program where leadership development started with you in a mastery first before you lead with others. It's important to be able to lead yourself first. Simple concept, hard to make happen sometimes because of life's distractions and out of focus. We don't spend enough time thinking about our inner world and the life we lead. The life we lead, and I want to underline that. We have a life we lead, and then we lead with others, and then we lead for others. And if we get that sort of circuitry right, real good stuff happens, because we can create a place where we show up at our best. We interact with each other, with others, with other leaders, with our teams, whatever it might be, in the best way possible. And we have the emotional intelligence and capacity and energy to leverage our relationships to create a culture whereby which other people can do those first two things, lead themselves well and lead with others. So that's a concept to understand. That's shaping the story that I'm going to share with you today. And then intergenerational intelligence happened to me from the perspective of doing leadership coaching for decades. I mainly, in my early time in that space, was working with more mature leaders. And getting folks to focus on the leading self part was a real challenge. It was a distraction. It wasn't taken seriously. It's life is life and work is work, always separated. And I was able to make a little dent in the universe from time to time. And then I decided to move my practice more towards high potentials. Folks who were younger and interested in growing and developing themselves. And it all changed. They were interested in leading self. They saw the significance of it. They understood what it meant and how it could help them do their best as leaders. And that was a big aha moment for me in relationship to the whole intergenerational challenge, because I started to have to deal with the negotiation between younger and elder leaders on what was most important to them and how they practiced leadership and what they needed for themselves. So I became a mediator between elder and younger leaders. It was an interesting, I couldn't have defined it that way while I was in it. But when I was able to zoom out and look back in, I could see that. So that's the intergenerational context. And then, that was, 30 years passed, and then 35 years passed, and then the, pandemic hit. And at that time, I started thinking more about, what am I going to do next? And I kind of went back to the future. So I reworked the Total Life Compass and called it the Total Life Plan for the Lifespan, because our lives were getting extended. And what kind of life are we going to have extended? Is it going to just be years, or is it going to be quality? And is it going to be significance, as Diana introduced? So then, coming out of the pandemic, trying to get back into a social setting, I started a program focused on intergenerational process with the Total Life Plan called The Supper, Breaking Bread for Building Bridges. And the intention was to bring intergenerational folks to the table to discuss what it is we want, what is it that we believe, and how we share values and create a connection that's a little bit different. And I've done 15 of those for about almost 175 people. who are out of those 175, another 50 are doing their own now. So that's kind of getting a little bit viral, which has been kind of fun too. And then I got to a place coming out of the pandemic of I have all these things I've done, and how am I going to bring them together so that I can focus on something that I can really put my energy to. And I realized that all of this experience can be translated into a process of us being able to live a life of significance that includes our work, but our work extended. And what I mean by that is our work in relationship to all things important to us. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. Some of you might have heard of the context of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. These are things facing us in the world today, putting challenges on us as individuals, on our families, on our communities, on our workplaces, and on our security or insecurity about the future. And your community and what Diane is doing with you is embracing that context and sharing a very similar mission as mine, which is a big reason why I'm so happy to be here. And one of the things that I think we have to think about in places where we have control or little control is what we can control as ourselves and how we think about this. So when I think about this, and what I've shared with many people over the last number of decades related to that VUCA underpinning, is that we can have a vision, we can have an unwavering sense of our own self and purpose and commitment to the things that are important to us, and control our ability to do our best work with a sense of clarity and the appropriate agility to manage the VUCA. So that's something that we're going to kind of build on as we go through this process together today, is how do we take care of us in relationship to the outer world and its impact on whether or not we can perform at our highest level and enjoy our significance and our impact and have a fulfilling and happy life, if you will. So we experienced a very significant eureka or aha moment during the pandemic. And those are the moments where things quiet down. We have a downshift from our output and energy in the outer world, and we were all nestled with family and those close to us. And those are the moments where we get very reflective. We have the chance to reflect, and we connect to what's really important to us for that moment. And in this case, it was, more than a moment. It was almost 3 years. And we've had a chance to think about what's going on inside and how it impacts the outside and vice versa. It's rare for people to be able to hold on to that moment and really take that moment and process it for the benefit of coming through something like this with a new, refreshed perspective on self-management and self-leadership, so that we can do our best. And we're going to take a little bit of a look at that. And how do we look at it from the potential of life quakes, which that kind of was a huge one, and turn it into a life pivot. So we're going to take a look at that as we go through this process here. So as I started to shape my thinking about what kind of contribution I could make to the narrative, to the capacity to give some tools and some thinking models for people to process this, I came up with, if you look at the wheel on the left, I was starting to think about purpose, and so much of the dialogue about purpose is finding something that's out there. But in fact, purpose lies within us. It's either more available and relevant and clear um, to some, and some it might be a little bit more dormant because we're busy. We're taking care of the external stuff, and we're not processing. So I started to think about how does this show up in my life? And one of the things I started to think about, it starts with me, that whole concept that I introduced a little bit earlier about leading yourself and looking at self-management and self-mastery and inner mastery for outer impact started to come to play in my brain. And I realized that starting with me and then my family, the foundation for family is so important to us. The pandemic taught us about that. And then I started to think about kinship beyond friendship. The people who are really close to you, who you trust, who have your back, who you travel through life with in ways that if your familiar family is not close to you, you create a family that surrounds you in the extended world, which is important. Then there's community, the act of being involved in community and shaping a space in which we live that supports who we are and gives us a chance to express ourselves in ways that creates the nurturing, if you will, that surrounds us. And then there's our work. Obviously, we spend a lot of time there thinking about it, doing it, hours of the day. How will we do that work with a sense of the support that we have for taking care of ourselves, our family having our back, kinship being extended, having a community that supports us, gives us a chance to show up at work differently, and then leave work and come back to a place that embraces us. Because if we don't have a place to go get embraced, we'll just stay at work, which many do even when they get home because they're not connected. So we get kind of, how would I say, embroiled in that if we're not really thoughtful about making sure we have touch points with all these other areas. And then there's the greater good, the things you care about in terms of the globe or meaningful projects that are important to you that are happening in your extended community. How do we give there? That's important to think about too. This is an ecosystem that is important for us to have touch points with. It's not a matter of having specific hours in each space. It's making sure that we're connected, because those things are really important. And if you think about it, if you have that ecosystem supporting you, you're probably going to have a higher level of significance spread through a mutual fund for yourself, if you will. Investments in lots of places that support you, and in turn, you support those 6 areas. And then on the right is the Total Life Compass work, the 40 years that I've spent on that work. And if you look at the center of that, it's a little bit hard to see, but I'll read it. Physical, emotional, and spiritual, or our values system. That's our inner mastery, if you will. The impact that has on family, social, lifelong learning, financial, career is the energy and the capacity and the performance enablement to do our best in those extended 5 areas. Very important to be thinking about as well. And you're going to get a chance as we move along the presentation to do a little bit of evaluation about where you are in reference to some of this, which I think will be helpful. But think about this wheel from the standpoint that if the inner is weakened by the outer, where does that leave us? exhausted, burned out, um, a little bit off kilter, if you will, not our best selves, if you will. So that's something to be thinking about as well. So, one of the standard kind of ways I've used examples in the past is if I have if my left arm here is representative of financial and I'm not managing money well and I have a lot of stress related to that, it takes my arm away from me. And then if I have a family conflict that's come about as a result, perhaps, by this financial challenge, a leg is taken away from me. So I show up to work without an arm, without a leg, standing on one leg. And that's the presence that I have at work. So if I'm enabled, arm free, leg solid, I show up differently. And leaders are dealing with aggregates of this. Thousands, millions of people are showing up, present or not present, based on how well they lead and manage themselves. So that's an important thing for us to think about as well. This is something that came to me a few days ago, and I posted it on LinkedIn and got some interesting responses. The evolution of the self-made man or woman in the 21st century. What's the new definition of net worth? I just gave some context of that. How well we lead and manage both leadership for the big picture and manage for execution ourselves is significant here and brings enormous profit to us, way beyond dollars. It brings dollars if we do it because we're valued, because we're present, focused, enabled. Our capacity is high. We can manage the stresses of work and life, and that's a portfolio. That's your self-responsibility. So try to put it and think about it in that context as leading yourself as if you were a business or a investment portfolio. And many, many, many financial planners are starting to get this.